Welcome everyone to DRJ's webinar series. I'm Bob Arnold, President here at DRJ. We thank you for your attendance today, and we hope you gather some great information from today's webinar. Today's sponsor is VOLO, and today's topic is 10 steps to achieve business continuity maturity. Our presenters today include John Louisi and Dr. Robert Chandler. John is a senior level executive with over 30 years of management experience in both the public and private sectors. His experience includes performing in key management roles for organizations such as Time Warner, Humana, Harris, Cronus Connect, and the IRS, where he was appointed to 3 terms of office by a special act of Congress to support the multi-billion-dollar modernization program at the IRS. During this time, he built the IRS's disaster recovery program, the security risk management organization, the critical infrastructure protection program, and he also directed the IRS's cybersecurity incident response and emergency operations center. John is currently the National Director of Business Continuity for Southern Wine and Spirits of America, the nation's largest distributor of wine and spirits with operations in 35 states, supported by one of the largest and most integrated supply chain logistics networks in the world. Dr. Chandler is an internationally recognized expert on communication topics related to disaster, crisis, and emergency events. With more than 25 years of groundbreaking research into human factor variables related to messages, comprehension, decision-making, and human behavior has been applied in a wide range of practical application and as a solution for fundamental challenges. He is a highly praised speaker and a presenter, accomplished trainer, and valued consultant. Well regarded for his insights and applications of theory and research, he is highly sought after for his knowledge, skills, and expertise by both private and public sectors. To get us started here today, I'd like to introduce Felipe Portocarrero. Over a decade of experience in the technology sector, specializing in communications, Mr. Portocarrero is one of the founders of VOLO. I'd like to welcome and turn the mic over to Felipe for a few brief announcements.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bob, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I'd like to start off by thanking the audience. We've had, I think, a great turnout so far for this series. Although the series is a little out of our wheelhouse, we're a notification vendor, and this is more building a framework for business continuity. When John first presented this concept to us, we were so excited about it, and we thought it was unique enough that we decided to sponsor the series. In addition, we reached out to Dr. Chandler, who I think you all know is an expert in communications, to ask him to kind of fill in the blanks for the communications piece for the 10 steps. So first, again, I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank John for contributing this material, and also Dr. Chandler for contributing the material that he did for this event. One last thing before we actually dive into this presentation today. We want to make this a series, and the reason why is because we've had such a great response to this concept that we thought the next best thing would be to dive into each of the 10 points individually and go into some more detail. So this is going to be the first of the series. We're going to cover the 10 points overall, and depending on what the response is to this particular presentation, we're going to move forward with continuing education on the individual points. So if you like what you hear and what you learn today, reach out to us, let us know, and that'll give us a good indication as to whether it's worth continuing with this series or not. You'll be able to find more information on our website, and obviously these are the 10 points that you see up on your screen right now. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Bob Arnold for this part of it, but this will essentially be how you ask questions.
Certainly. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can find the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You can type them in there, and our presenters will answer as many as possible as we get to at the end of the today's session. So with no further introduction, I'd like to welcome and turn the mic over to John now.
Well, thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody being available today and being part of this webinar. I want to thank Felipe and the staff at VOLO for allowing us the opportunity to present this material. And I'm also honored to be on the same webinar with Dr. Chandler, a world-known, world-renowned speaker. So I appreciate everybody's input and everybody's abilities to allow us to be here today. So what we want to talk about today is this business continuity framework that we developed here for Southern Wine and Spirits. It's a very, very simplistic model. None of this is rocket science, but it essentially is a very, very easy model to follow for the maturity of building a business continuity program. What we're looking for in coming into Southern and coming to starting this for this national organization, actually a worldwide organization, was in building a business continuity program. How do you do it across all of our divisions and do it with a repeatable process, having the same consistency across all of our divisions? Because each of our divisions, each of our states, kind of operates as separate operating divisions. So we want to be able to have a consistent flow and approach associated with that and execute our business continuity model the same. So we needed to come up with a very, very simplistic model in being able to do that. Southern, as a business, operates one of the most complex logistics networks in the world, but yet as a business in itself, Southern's really actually a very, very simple business. So we had to make sure that when we put the business continuity program together, we wanted to make sure that it was repeatable, was executable, was something that was very simplistic to put in place. It was able to communicate to the business in the terms that they essentially understood. We wanted to make this as easy and as fun of a process, to be honest with you. One of the things that, coming from my previous experience and most recently building business continuity programs for the IRS, I mean, those can be obviously very, very complex depending upon the organization and the structure and the overall guidance and the things and the compliance requirements that we had to meet. A lot of those didn't exist for Southern, so I really had a greenfield opportunity here to build a program and build a structure that can essentially be very scalable. So we have larger divisions, we have smaller divisions. It's very much laser focused on building requirements, deliverables, milestones. It's easy to manage. It's also easy to achieve, essentially tracking our progress throughout it. One of the biggest challenges in business continuity programs is all your executives are always going to say, what's the question we always get? Are we there yet? Are we done yet? Well, when you look at the framework, and we'll get to it in another slide or so, you'll exactly see specifically you're actually able to track your progress. You're actually able to show where you are in this maturity very, very simply, very, very easy. So it's very easy to understand for folks, executives to comprehend exactly where the program is and where are we in our maturity process. There's milestones, there's recognitions built, recognition steps built into it, so you can ensure you have accountability built into the program. And for those that are working with, certain industry best practices and standards, your DRIIs, your British standards, your ISO standards, those all can be built into each of the steps as you go through it. So this is really very much of an execution model associated with building business continuity, and it's, like I say, a very, very simplistic, very, very repeatable process that we were looking for to build for a company as large as we were and as diverse as we were. So what I want to do now is turn it over to Dr. Chandler to talk about the importance of communication and the key functions in building business continuity programs. So Dr. Chandler?
Thanks, John, I'm delighted to be here as well, and thanks to everybody. I guess it's no surprise that my first comment is that all business continuity planning really hinges on being able to communicate. I think for many people, communication is the secondary, well, we've got to work to figure out where we want to go, what we want to do. And I guess my research leads me to flip that around, that knowing how to work together to decide where you want to go and what you want to do requires that you coordinate, you share information, you motivate. Let me just give you one quick example. I think the rationale for establishing a business continuity program itself, I know it seems silly, but it's basically explaining the why question. Why are we doing this? And once people understand that, they know how it affects them and their role in the process, then you begin to unfold it, because I would suggest that nothing works unless you focus on effective communication. So just getting it started, I think answering the questions of the why are we doing this, how are we going to do it, what is it we're doing, when will it be done by? And I really appreciated I had a chance to preview John's steps to maturity model here, and one of the things that really struck me is that at every single step along the way, whether it's training, whether it's after action reviews, whether it's testing the plan, it's command, control, and coordination, from my bias, from my standpoint, if you don't communicate well in doing those things, then frankly none of that actually works. And so don't try to always say what I talk about is the important thing, but in this case,
communication is vitally important to making any of the key functions work. You can't conduct a business impact analysis. You can't do a risk analysis. You can't even really lead during a crisis if you can't communicate. And I think you have to expand the notion of that. So it's not just information, although that's criticality, it's critical that information's included, but that you understand the processes involved. And that's, of course, the things that fascinate me. And I love to help other people overcome them. I'll just really leave you with one thought. I think that for communication to work in each of these steps, you need both, on one hand, the right tools. You need the right ways to connect. You need to be able to keep people informed and coordinated. And I think that's really, I'll go back to what Felipe said at the introduction, you know, in terms of having that kind of provision. And I think that's where you look back to make sure that your technology is not the impediment, in fact, that it facilitates the process. And then I think the second thing is that communication is not only having the right tools, but it's having the right knowledge, insight, subject expertise that allows you to, you know, if the tools help you make the calls, then having that knowledge and insight and that coaching helps you make the right calls. And you're trying to make sure you coordinate this with the right people at the right time in the right ways. And so from both standpoints, I think all of this works only if you have a bedrock, if you have a foundation of effective communication, because I think it's essential.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Shannon. Thank you for your comments. Okay. So now, if we look at page 6 now on our screen, this is the 10 steps, essentially going from program initiation all the way up for a business continuity program to be institutional. Now, the bottom part of it is obviously very foundational, establishing the program, establishing the basis of all of decision-making moving forward. So that's what we would consider our assess phase. The middle part of it, which is in yellow, is essentially, okay, so now we're actually doing something. We're actually developing our plans. We're actually putting pen to paper and actually developing the content that we're going to be using for our plan specifically. And then once we complete that part of it, then we're going to go into this exercise program where we're actually going to be going through exercises, training, operational. So now we're going to be in full execution mode from there. So this is the way it's laid out, specifically going up this stair step ladder approach associated with the different steps. You can easily tell. I can easily tell my executives, hey, in California, I am at step 9. Hey, in Illinois, I am at step 5. I can exactly pinpoint specifically where each of my programs exactly where they are, and they can understand, okay, what else do we need to do to ensure success? What's our next step? What's our from building our maturity and completing our program? So here's the model specifically. We're going to walk through each one of these 10 steps very, very briefly, like Felipe discussed. You can actually have a whole webinar just on each one of these 10 steps, and we'll discuss those in the future. But essentially right now, here's what the 10 steps are, and I'll go through each one of these specifically. Okay. So the first one is program initiation, and essentially here's your foundation for success. Here's where we're going to establish our mission and vision. We're going to define our scope, our priorities. We're going to put together our teams, who's involved, who's who. We're going to define people's roles and responsibilities. And what's really, really important here is establishing that oversight, and especially steering committees. I think steering committees are the source of power for business continuity, so it's really, really important that you establish those early on. One of the things that's also important as you go through a program initiation is really understanding your organization's culture, which is how your organization communicates, how they interact with each other, what are the protocols, what are the common frequencies of meetings and things like that. And just understanding that really, and making sure you understand that, and then you can embed that into the rest of your program, because that's going to ensure success, because you want this to be as seamless as possible into the culture of your organization and everything people do within your organization, how they communicate and how they interact with each other. This is also where you're defining, hey, staffing people. This is also where you're going to talk about budgeting specifically, and it's also kind of where you're talking about your tool strategies. What type of tools do we want to put in place? So from an organizational perspective, how mature are we? Do we have tools? Do we need a business continuity management tool? Do we need a notification system? Are we going to go into a mobile strategy? More and more companies, obviously nowadays, the focus is on having mobile devices and having mobility for their plans. So that's also part of something you need to kind of plan in from the beginning. Is what the approach that we're going to take? Are we going to develop a mobile strategy associated with it? Or how are we going to manage the information? Are we going to use a basic, SharePoint site to manage our information? Or are we going to bring in a BCM tool? Are we going to have an event alerting type of application? So all those are the type of things that you want to understand from the beginning, so you know how to integrate those as you build all your plans and build the roles and responsibilities, so folks understand exactly their role, their responsibility, as well as how the program is going to be executed ultimately. So, Dr. Chandler, any quick thoughts on program initiation?
Right. From my standpoint, I think that the way you do everything you just described goes back to whether or not people understand where you're at, where you need to be. And so I would see it as an interactive process. And anytime you have interaction, you have opportunities for, misunderstandings and factions and things. And so I think part of it is just getting it initiated and getting complete buy-in and getting everyone on board. I was just sitting here reflecting that really, in order to have any aspect of what you're accomplishing, you've got to be able to get people to share that vision. And creating a shared vision and a common mission would be the main steps in program initiation. The other thing is that, there are different, to me, stages of initiation. There's the sort of cold start. There's I think you used the phrase, greenfield project. But even if you think you've already initiated something, I think there's a process there, and I think you call attention to it, that you might even come back around to making sure that you reassess mission and vision and protocols and steps. Everything grows, everything changes, and I think that's something that I would encourage, is not to think, oh, we did that a year ago, we don't ever have to think about it again, because I do think it's something that you assess. And I think finally, everything is sort of a moving target, and so I would urge to think. I'm trying to think of a technical term. I'm not a technical person, but kind of scalable and flexible, because as your business's mission expands, as your functions and processes expand, my guess is that everything down this line would shift as well. And so you want to make sure that you don't limit yourself to an old vision of who you were and what your business purpose was and business mission, and that you do understand that. And I think that's true with any of these things, deciding policies, deciding which communication tools you want first and foremost, for any question that comes up.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Chandler. Okay, so let's talk about step 2 now, which is the risk assessment. So now we're kicking off the ground. We're actually going to start looking at our organization and start doing some type of assessment. So when you do risk assessments, we really want to develop a simple model to do this. There are so many ways of calculating risk, and there's so many complex actuary models and things like that. And you really have to be careful, because you don't want the whole project to be focused on risk. It's really, understanding that risk. Pretty much most of us know specifically what are the risks associated with our business, and we can probably prioritize those pretty easily by mapping them back against our business impact assessment. One of the things that I've always talked about is that folks get caught up in risk and the sensationalism of the risk, when you really need to just kind of focus on the business. And no matter how you got down or how the situation in the business was impacted, the fact is that the business has been impacted no matter what the circumstances were to get it there. So you really want to focus more about what the recovery strategy is, not necessarily about assigning numbers and scores associated with particular risks. So it's really, really important to make sure that as you look at risk, you don't get caught up in too much into the sensationalism, but really focus more on the business recovery. Understand the difference between risks and threats. A hurricane is a threat, it's not a risk. A lot of folks kind of get some of those things confused. You want to be able to portray the right risk assessment for your organization. You want to be able to prioritize your risk associated with your most critical assets. And you want to make sure that you have identified the risks in detail so the mitigation can be prioritized. So and be careful, like I say, of understanding that you also need to understand your processes, your people, your facilities, your technologies, your supplier, and your vendors also need to be part of your own risk assessment. So it's not only just about what's in your own four walls. You want to make sure that your extended supply chain is also, you're also doing an assessment of risk within that supply chain itself. Okay, so the business impact assessment is our next step. And essentially, this is where the most important part of your program, I always call it, because this is where you're actually becoming a credible, you're gaining the credibility of the business because you're talking and speaking and you're understanding the business terms. You're understanding your critical business processes, you're understanding your sub-processes, you're quantifying impacts, you're calculating the true cost of downtime, And you're then taking that information and you're creating analyses around what would the impacts to the organization be. You're involving all of your stakeholders, because this is not about you. This is about them. This is about their data and their everyday performance. So you want to make sure that they're the ones that are validating and they're the ones that are owning the data specifically around your business impact assessment. You want to make sure that your BIA is circulated. You want to make sure you have the appropriate buy-in associated with it throughout the organization. And I've often said that the BIA has to be the most traveled document in your library. It's what gives you the credibility. What gives you the ability to talk in business terms and be able to get business attention. I often say that every business continuity person needs to have needs to have an elevator speech around the business impact assessment, associated demonstrating your knowledge, become an expert of that. And like I say, one of the other things around business impact assessment is also understanding your vendors, your suppliers, your whole entire supply chain. Because like for us in Southern, we have a very, very extended supply chain. So understanding the business impacts, if we were to lose one of those suppliers or vendors, how they would impact our business, how they would impact our customers and our ability to meet our performance goals is really, really important for us to be able to quantify. So again, and as well as mitigate if we had to do any type of risk associated with that. So it's really, really important. The business impact assessment is the foundation of your program. Okay, so step 4 is recovery strategy development. So now we're actually figuring out exactly what our solution's going to be, how are we going to recover from, what type of strategies we're going to put in place associated with any type of business loss, any type of business impact. So what's important here is to make sure you're balancing your risk versus your cost. You don't want to put in $1 million solution to save $100,000 in revenue. And what's also important about, when you're doing your recovery strategy development, based on what you know currently about your business, and make sure you involve, again, your partners, your suppliers, and your key vendors, because they're probably going to be part of some solution as well, so you want them involved in the design of it. Make sure it's based on, true scenarios that really could affect your business. And it's also applicable importantly, back to you meeting your RTO and your RPO objectives. What's also important is you want to make sure that it's not any type of solution that you design. It's not a Star Wars solution. It's something that actually specifically works and actually is tested and actually can be, seamlessly integrated into the day-to-day business today, because you want to make any type of recovery strategy as part of what your business does today. So it's very, very seamless, very, very easy for people to adopt and people to actually work through, given a situation where they actually had to execute the recovery strategy. Okay. Our next step is actually our plan development step. So going into the different types of plans, your DER plans, your crisis management, your process recovery, and emergency management, those are the 4 types of plans specifically here that we have at Southern. And then we also have one that's in the middle, which is essentially that master plan associated, which governs the execution of all of those other 4 plans. What we strive to do is make sure that we have a template that has common formats and terminology, so I can go from one plan to the other and things look and feel the same, the terms are the same, as well as I can go from one division to the next, and it's portable. So I can send one of my people that's managing a program in one division and send them to another division, and it's seamlessly, because all the plans look and feel exactly the same throughout the nation. So it's really, really important as part of your plan development process to make sure that you have consistency across your plans, make sure your information is centralized, you can get at your plans, it's easy achievable, there's the appropriate amount of security around all of your plans, and it's important that the trend in nowadays, and what I see from everybody, is that we're writing much simpler plans that we wrote years ago. So no longer the 600-page plan is no longer acceptable in the industry anymore, because it's just nobody's ever going to read it. So it just becomes shelfware. So and plus the fact now that we're going to more and more mobility associated with our plans, as a result, plans need to be much more straightforward, much more bulleted in nature, targeted in nature, much more portable. And as a result, you're seeing plans that are much more action and task driven specifically, not necessarily around just pages and pages and pages upon content associated with that. So making sure the plans are, and once again, the usability of the plans, again, going back to the mobile solution, being able to work through and having a mobile incident management platform as well, and being able to leverage it and moving your plans and having your plans livable and breathing specifically actually on your mobile device is really, really important, because chances are, guess what, I'm not going to have my binder of plans with me in the middle of a disaster, but chances are I will have my mobile device with me. So as a result, if I can have accessibility to my plans, that's really, really powerful and really, really a time saver for me as far as executing any type of recovery strategy. Also, big thing about plan development is don't go for perfect, go for continent usability. Quality will come over time. A disaster is not going to wait for you to have a perfect plan. So you want to make sure that you continually, show progress. You continually develop, quality will come over time as more and more testing and evaluation exercises go through, refinement goes through. So it's important to establish different levels for your plans, but it's essentially as you move along your maturity level and as your program gets, developed over time and your subject matter experts become more and more versed in business continuity, the quality of your plans will dramatically increase over time. Okay, so plan review, which is step 6. So this is really important now because most folks just jump right into, go from plan development into plan testing. Well, what we built into the framework was a plan review phase, and the reason is because we wanted to really, before we went into a testing phase, we wanted to really look at the guidelines and quality standards. We wanted to see, if the plan actually had some viability associated with it. We wanted to role play with the plans. We wanted some feedback and be able to pass them amongst peers to see if the plans actually are readable and actually work, are actually just, do they communicate the steps that's needed? Because one of the things I always try to do with my plans is take the people that are out of the actual front lines who actually would execute the plans and put them in the hands of someone else, and to see if they can actually execute the plan based on the level of detail that's presented in the plan. So it's really, really important to have a plan review to see if you can actually achieve those type of objectives. So you're looking for flow, consistency, consistent use of terms, instructions, but it's really important just to take the time specifically around being able to go through and review your plans before you actually go into a testing mode. Because when you go into a testing mode, because that tends to be more of a very dedicated environment, you carve out time for that, sometimes 3 or 4 hours to do a test. You want to make that time when you have people come together, you want to make sure that time is most productive as possible. So if you taking a step to doing a review session or before then actually pays a lot of benefits to you. Okay, so plan exercise is next. Okay, most important thing, plan exercise is to take the time to develop a great exercise. And it really does take time. It takes planning to develop it. You want to make sure that you involve all of your stakeholders in each exercise that you do. Everybody should have something to do during an exercise. You're looking to build confidence, and this is essentially a teaching and training moment. Everything about a plan exercise and any type of interaction, these are your moments to be able to teach and train a lot of different concepts and principles associated with business continuity. They should never be a gotcha or an embarrassing for anything, for any particular type of person within the test. You want to make sure that you're teaching, you're keeping it very, very focused, you're keeping you're concise, measurable, quantifying, you're challenging your objectives. You want to make sure that you actually use real scenarios that could affect your business. You want to make sure that you're clarifying roles and responsibilities. And what's important to understand is that, under a business continuity scenario, there could be a new chain of command. So as a result, you want to help people to understand what that chain of command might be, who's responsible, who's involved, and also help them understand that, this is now the new norm. So how do we operate in this new norm, and how do we follow the instructions associated with now with the situation that's been cast upon us, right? So you want to make sure that you elevate your exercises complexity over time, essentially maturity. So you start out with basic exercises, and then you continue to increase the level of intensity and the level of complexity over time, because you're trying to build that maturity. You're trying to build confidence. You're trying to help people to understand exactly their role and responsibility, help them really feel good about this. And if you do it all right, guess what? People want to come back for more, and they want to participate in these exercises again. We had a great experience in California for what we were doing for our program, where we were doing plan exercises with some of our people, and they, as you went through the exercise, it was really you could tell that they instantly got the program. So for the longest time when we were developing plans, they were giving us information, we were developing steps and strategies and things like that, and that went on, and that went really well, and they were engaged in that. But you can tell that the light went on for them as soon as they sat into an exercise, because that's when you put them in the moment. That's when they actually had to execute based on a certain set of circumstances, and it was a great experience for them, because they really felt like, wow, this plan, I really have to, and so they actually went back and actually provided more and more content and things like that because of what they had learned, being they put themselves in the moment of being in the middle of an exercise. So it really was a great revelation for us to see how people develop their maturity just by going through an exercise. So, okay, and another thing about exercises is you want to make sure you have time after an exercise to review. When I was with the government, they used to call them hot washes after an exercise. Go through and talk about what went right, what went wrong, the lessons learned, that type of thing. And it's really important that you want to make sure that you get the results out within a very, very, very short time frame. Get back to people since it's still fresh in their mind exactly what transpired, what are the action items, what's the next steps. Those type of things are important there. Okay, training and education, step 8. Okay, so now really, really important associated with being leverage events and program activities as teaching moments. Anytime you're talking about business continuity, you have a teaching moment. So how are you going to leverage that? You want to be able to create outreach and awareness opportunities and program promotion. Okay, so when I was with the IRS and building the disaster recovery program there, we had established the month of September as being a disaster recovery month, and that was in honor of September 11th. So what I did was, in the program, and my staff did, they set me up to go throughout the country and give speeches basically on business continuity and disaster recovery. That was a great experience. Over 2,000 people, as I went throughout the entire country, giving speeches on business continuity and disaster recovery, attended these moments and attended these meetings. So it was a great way to promote the program and get more buy-in, more engagement associated with just being able to, take a launching point like the September 11th and what that meant, and being able to use that to leverage that to help build our program. So it was a teaching moment, and it was just a rallying moment for us as well. Important for understanding from training and education, role-based, making sure people understand their roles and trying to build their competency associated with that. You're always continually assessing their competencies and their skill sets. Always remember that it's not always going to be the A team that's available to respond to a disaster type situation. So as a result, it's not only just the first team that has to be trained, but it's also the other teams as well. Other people that are also potentially could be called in to fulfill a role during a situation that they also need to be trained as well. So you want to make sure you don't leave them out as part of any type of training and education process. A really important thing is also to use the news. And what I mean by that is that we see all kinds of disaster situations and companies that are affected and organizations that are affected by some type of situation. I mean, recently you've seen all of the breach of week with the cyber events, those type of things. But any other type of event that happens to a company, what we do here is that, hey, how would that affect? What would we do if that was us? Take that from a lessons perspective. If something happened to some other company and you bring it back into your organization, say, hey, what would we do? How would we handle that situation? And it's really interesting to get the dialogue with your executives around looking at something like that. And we don't want that to happen to us. And the level of engagement is pretty amazing to see how people pay attention to things like that, because they can actually see that those things actually do happen to other organizations. And we want to take proactive steps so it doesn't happen to us. So as a result, it's really, really important to use and really, really beneficial to use events like that. So, okay, Dr. Chandler, training and education, you are an expert in this, so give us a few comments on this.
Well, I have a couple of things that I would suggest. The first thing in terms of training and education, there are differences in the quality of training and the methods and the models used. And so I would suggest, and they make a difference in terms of outcomes on learning effectiveness. And so one of the things that I think are very important is to pay specific attention to the processes and methods of training, and it has to tie to both your goals and objectives and the characteristics of those who you're training. So my takeaway word was you should assess training and education, and you should have an independent evaluation of whether or not it's effective and work. It also ties into your previous point, John, going back to exercises. Exercises themselves are an inherent part of the training and education loop. Let me just give you a couple of quick statistics. In our research, we found that you can get 80% of the benefits of a real-world experience to a training experience if, in fact, that training and exercise is designed appropriately to get those outcomes from it. That means that rather than have to go through a real disaster, we can show you that you can get up to 80% of the value of having gone through it strictly by structured and simulated training. Is it exactly the same? No. Can you make progress and advance in terms of your readiness? Absolutely. But it's only if you do it right. So I suggest that in terms of training, education, and exercises that you use a multimodal, interlaced approach for learning that varies in both scope and range, and that you have an assessment. You evaluate it consistently, and then you change it. We call it closing the loop, that you actually change the process and you measure it so that you can see those things that are moving forward. Let me do one more thing. You mentioned the hot washes, actually, when you were doing the exercises. I was trained in my doctoral program. We call them after-action reviews. Other people call them post-mortems. That one bothers me. But let me just say one thing about that in regarding education. You can't just throw that together. The after-action review itself has to be well-planned and thought out. It has to be structured. And in fact, there are some great resources available that would help you get more out of an after-action review. Probably the biggest thing in any debriefing is that we very often write lessons learned, and we do a wonderful job of writing them up and publishing them. Where we fall down is taking those lessons learned and translating them into action steps to actually change what we do the next time we go through it. I can't tell you how many after-action review debriefing sessions I've sat in where they say, yeah, we had a problem, and they'll say, yeah, that's the same problem we had last time, and yeah, that's the same problem we always seem to have. And in fact, I've been in the room when people said, we should probably quit worrying about that, we're never going to get it right, which is the wrong answer. The right answer is to say, let's make sure at least that problem doesn't happen the next time. The same is true with communication. Sitting in all these after-action reviews, I don't know if it makes me feel good or bad. I have mixed feelings. But the number one thing mentioned in terms of breakdowns and exercises usually has something to do with communication. No one told us. Oh, you forgot us. Oh, we didn't understand. We thought it was the opposite. And I think anytime you have an issue emerge, your training, your exercise, your education needs to be targeted with objectives that address those agendas. And I find so many people that don't fine-tune it. They use a metric hammer on the solution rather than the right tools to advance it, and that's something that I feel very strongly about. Sorry for my enthusiasm, but it's something that's controllable, and yet I continue to see people repeating the same mistakes again and again.
What, Dr. Chano, one thing we all love about you is your passion for this. So don't ever lose that. So one thing about business continuity people that I've learned about is we're passionate about what we do, and you are an example of that, a very, very vivid example of that. So appreciate that. Okay, let's move on to step 9 now, talking about being operational now. So we are now incident ready. We are now ready for Armageddon Day. So now lessons learned from our incidents are incorporated into our programs. We've done testing, we've done exercises, our people are ready, we've done training. We are now regular maintenance schedule. At Southern, just so you know, we do quarterly maintenance schedules and reviews of our plans. Specifically, so it's important for you to determine what that cycle would be for your organization. What we want to try to do is keep that fresh in everybody's mind and keep it right on the forefront of agendas and schedules. So we make sure we do that on a quarterly basis. Constant outreach and awareness. Continually sharing our BIA results, our actual events. Keep tracking all the things that occur to our within our organization, so people understand that there are things that happen that potentially could affect our organization. We're also making sure that anything that goes on in the organization from a change perspective, we're incorporating that into our plans as part of our maintenance program. And like I say, we're staying current with our organizational develops as things change within, whether it's people, technology, market specifically, our vendors, our suppliers, whatever those things are. So we're operationally ready. We've completed the entire process. We've gone to the point where we now are incident ready. So, and that's where most companies basically stop. So the next part is now becoming institutional. So now this is the most important and this is the most difficult step for organizations to get to. And the reason is because now it's where you're going to make it part of your DNA. So now everything that you do in that organization in some way, shape, or form, there's a continuity component or continuity decision that has to be incorporated into it. So getting to the point where that is part of the thought process, part of the planning, part of the budgeting process takes time to do. But what's really, really important to understand is that how well you've done the previous 9 steps helps you understand, gets that adoption into that process quicker, because why? People have been involved, people have been communicated with, they've been trained, they've been through exercises, they've been through plan development, they own the business impact assessment stuff, they own the risk assessment stuff. So if the job that you've done in the previous 9 steps helps you get to an institutional part, because once you get to an institutional part of it, business continuity almost becomes on autopilot, and that's where we all want to get to from a company perspective with our organizations. Have our organization be able to assimilate this and be able to do this as part of their natural. It's almost like it's muscle memory, essentially, what you could also call it, associated with business continuity. But it's really, really important that those other 9 steps, how well you've done those, how well you've documented them, how well you've gone through and done all the training and the communication to them, helps you get to the point where step 10, where you're becoming institutional. So like I say, some organizations will never get there because why? Maybe that hasn't been done the appropriate amount of diligence. But those organizations that do, institutional is definitely a goal that they can achieve. So, okay. So I'm going to ask Dr. Chandler to talk about communication and the 6 stages of crisis, managing a crisis. So.
Thanks, John. I won't belabor this, and basically this is a model which probably many members of the audience have heard me speak on, and I've got a couple of books out there. And the basic thesis is that an event, whether you call it a disaster or an incident or a crisis, or it doesn't really matter, that's not what I'm pushing after in this model. But basically the idea is that any of these contingency events have a life cycle. Now, not all of them unfold in the same pace. Not all of them take the same amount of time. Everyone has its own uniqueness. But when it comes to planning for your communication, what I train and teach is that you should think about the life cycle, because you're not going to have the same communication objectives at different points in the life cycle. For example, your target audiences will change. So if I get a bomb threat and I need to alert people about it, that's one set of audiences. After a bomb has exploded and we've covered it and the police have let us come back in our building, I have to communicate, but there's a whole separate set of audience that I communicate to. And so part of the 6 stages of a crisis are to make you remember that as a crisis unfolds, you not only will your target audiences shift, but your message agenda will shift. When I'm trying to communicate, we're going to do a search in the building, we're looking for suspicious packages, that's one set of messages that are different than there's been an incident or an explosion, we need to evacuate. I mean, we need to think about communication at the different points in the life cycle. Also, not only do our audiences change and our messages change, but the audience's needs change. We find that people want you to inform them different things at different points in an event, and you have to be adapted to it. If you look at my illustration on the slide, you'll notice that as the crisis life cycle unfolds, I increase both the color intensity and the size of it. Now, I'm not a great graphic artist by any means, but my point here is that the pressures, both time pressures, psychological pressure, stress, high stress, hyper stress, fearfulness, a lot of things that I measure actually increase during it. So if you've got an active shooter in your building, some messages aren't going to work. I can't get to my device, or even if I read the message, my brain won't process it at that moment. And so you need to think about also adjusting during the life cycle of a crisis to what you say, how you say it, when you say it, to whom, and it becomes very much focused on people actually comprehending and understanding rather than just reaching them. And one of the reasons I'm glad that VOLO is a sponsor of today's event is they're really trying to provide a service that provides both the tools and the intellectual knowledge that helps come in and answer those questions. So basically, we're saying that a crisis is not a singularity; it's a life cycle. That communication is not just one thing. And we have to stop thinking about it, because I could pick any slice of time. If I could do an MRI of my little chart up there, at any slice in that we do, there would be a completely different set of time. I mean, at one point we care about the media, but at other times I don't give a damn about talking to the media, and vice versa. There are times when constituents and customers need to be notified, but there's other times when your team needs to be alerted, and that's what the priority is. And so using the 6 stages is really a planning tool, and it's one that I've gotten tremendous positive feedback with in every organization I've used it with, from a small size business to actually I finished a project with the United Nations who used this model on their global notification. So it's scalable. This is not this model here can help anybody plan better and help us think about the entire communication during an entire life cycle of an event rather than just one particular time.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Chen. That was great. That was really, really insightful about crisis communications. No question about the fact that that's a challenge for all of us, and being able to understand when and how you do that and how often, and just being able to communicate with the right people at the right time is really, really important to understand, and be able to make sure you build that into your crisis management program. Okay, so some closing thoughts, and there's my information, so folks can feel free to reach out to me directly if they have any other further comments or questions, or would like to share any type of information with me specifically. But I want to first of all, thank VOLO, Felipe and his team for the opportunity to present here today and talk about the 10-step program. It actually worked really, really well from an execution perspective. It's something that we adopted here, trying to come up with a simplistic way to approach business continuity, take it from a lot of different disciplines to try to make it something that's very, very repeatable, very, very communicable throughout our organization, easy to follow, and we were very successful with this model. So I appreciate the ability to kind of share it, and willing to share it with anyone else that wants to talk further about it specifically. So I want to give Dr. Chandler have a few closing notes, and then we're going to take some time for some questions. So.
All right, thanks, John. I'll just be very brief here. I'm a wordy, long-winded person. I apologize, but let me just say this: I really appreciated your 10 steps. I think they're very insightful. I think they're very helpful. I would only add one little kind of hitchhike, one little idea. I would encourage people as they go through your steps to not think about them as a linear process. I have found it's not useful to think someone's over the finish line, so now we don't have to worry about this anymore. And I understand where you're going, and I think it's useful. I would remind people that it's a process of continuous improvement. I like what you said about, if you wait for the perfect plan, the disaster won't wait for the perfect plan. I think that's absolutely true. I think most plans are like adolescents. They have a lot of potential, and they can get you through some things, but with continuous growth and improvement and revision. So I would suggest to come back and revisit the process and see this as an ongoing rolling cycle of continuing to mature, continuing to refine, to adapt, to evolve and be ready for what things come. So I'll stop there, and I look forward to some good questions.
Okay, great. Okay, so let me turn it over. Again, thank you, Bob, and I thank you very much for a discussion today. So, Bob Arnold, we have some questions from the audience.
Most certainly, and again, if anyone does have any questions here for Bob or for John here today, you can find that question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If we do not get to it today, they will have access to them afterwards to follow up with everyone. So just don't be concerned if we don't get to them here online. So let's jump right into them. How long did it take for you to implement this program at Southern Wine?
Okay, so what we did was for us to go from a program, and if I walked into one of my new divisions now, and taking the framework that we put in place with all the the templates and the structure that we have in place now, it is an 8 to 12 month process to get from step 1 through step 9. And what that's based on is not only this, doing all the steps and executing and keeping moving forward, but we also have some seasonality built into our business. So you always have to take that into consideration as far as the resource availability for certain things. But for us, it's an 8 to 12 month process. So.
All right. How can you develop a BC program in an organization without senior management sponsorship?
You can't. You can't without senior management. I mean, it all starts at the top. It all starts with their buy-in, and because they're the ones that help you get the resources and help you drive the program through from initiation all the way through the end. Because if you don't have buy-in, if you don't have executive sponsorship, and I like to call the establishing the executive steering committee. I mean, that's a big source of power for an organization to be able to drive business continuity. But without senior buy-in, senior leadership, I mean, you're almost on your own. To be honest with you, you need to have a champion. You need to have an executive that's going to stand up as that we're going to fix this. And that's what I have here at Southern. I mean, I have several. I have no shortage of people that are on a day-to-day basis communicating with me about the importance of this program. So, which is, you know, a great problem for me to have. It's also a problem for me to have, if you know what I mean. But
let me hitchhike, John, just real briefly. I talk to a lot of people out on the ground, a lot of foot soldiers, and I agree entirely with what you said. Obviously, I think any kind of continuity planning is a strategic level analysis for any business, and it needs to have responsibility at the strategic level. What tends to happen, however, is that I find a lot of senior managers who think that this sort of business continuity planning can be delegated downwards to some worker bee, and they've got it, and it's out of sight, out of mind. I just finished a project this week where I talked to CEOs of about 84 of the largest corporations in the country, and I can't tell you that almost 40% of them basically have mission-critical functions handled by interns, and they're unsure what to do. We were talking about monitoring social media and social media gaps, just to let you know, the little background. And they think, well, I delegate it downwards. And I find the same thing happens with sometimes continuity planning is, well, that's somebody that just needs to know where all the emergency supplies are and who we call to clean up after the fire. And in fact, I really think you have to, I'm going to preach this sermon. Whether anybody hears it or not or repents, I don't know. But let me just say, I think you have to call and hold accountable senior leadership to make sure that they are engaged and involved. And everything you've said, I would echo. But I do know, and I run across it in my travel, my work, my teaching, my training, that there's a lot of people who think this can just be delegated downwards, and I don't think it works. I think you're right. I think not only do you have to have buy-in from senior leadership, I would go further. You have to have some accountability of senior leadership to make sure this is happening and that the people working get the resources and support they need to do it. And so, yes, again, I'm sorry for my passion. I preach too many sermons, I know.
All right, several questions around this of how many employees Southern has, as well as how large is your BC or DR teams?
I have a team of 6. We have 14,000 people in the organization.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. So next question here. Seems like you went counter developing a plan for every possible scenario instead of focusing on keeping it general. How is that working?
No, what we want to do is the framework is really an execution model. So what we really want to do is we're developing our plans so that they are adaptable to any type of situation. So like I said, it's not about what actually happened to us. It's about the fact that our business in some way, shape, or form has been impacted or impaired. So as a result, no matter what happened to us, we just want to focus on the recovery, not necessarily, you know, the facts of what actually just happened to us, because it's inevitable something's going to happen to us. We're just never ever going to be able to think of every possible situation or scenario that's going to happen to us. So what? But if we write a plan that says, hey, we're down, and as a result, you know, these are the steps we need to take to put ourselves back together again, that's the most important thing, because that'll be much more resilient because it's flexible based on whatever happens to us. That's the way I develop the plans.
All right, you talked about a master plan. Is that where you have the general information that affects all teams and areas, and what is all in that piece?
Okay, the master plan, the business continuity master plan is essentially what ties the other 4 plans together. So it establishes the overall execution of when the different plans would get executed. It defines the overall roles and responsibilities. It defines the overall teams associated with who's involved. So it's basically governing how the execution of the overall entire business continuity program would be executed in a particular division if there were some type of disaster event. So it would govern how we would do how the disaster recovery program would be invoked and executed under what situations. It would govern the crisis management, the emergency evacuation plans, and as well as the business process recovery. So it is the overall governing document that provides the strategic overall. It's really more about the strategic overall plan for the organization, and then the other plans become much more of the tactical approach to execution.
All right, here's a question for Dr. Chandler. How do you communicate on a high level as well as convince that organization should take incidents and disasters more seriously?
Well, first of all, you've got to get the ear of that high level. So you've got to find a way to have the conversation to begin with, and sometimes that comes internally. Sometimes it helps to bring in someone from outside. You know, sometimes a prophet in their home country doesn't have much honor, but someone else who comes in can do that. The persuasion is really simple. I mean, most executives and their boards are actually already accountable both on a financial and an organizational operational level to ensure that these processes are in place, and sometimes you just have to remind them of that accountability. Case studies work well. I get more calls after a disaster is in the news, so you certainly would want to use those moments in time where they said, oh my gosh, this could happen to us. Those are great entryways, by the way, to get someone to take it more specifically and seriously. I think you have to talk the language and understand. I think you know, we're all busy and everybody is convinced, and I think for some people the biggest challenge is just denial. If you have something to get over the whole denial that this could really happen and we'd have to be prepared for it, it gets much easier. And so part of it is I think just laying out the threat and the risk. Again, I did this project this week and we presented some data. There's an 85% probability of an event happening within a 5-year span that will cost at least 1/4 of a company's value. I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of showing the risk threats that will finally get someone's attention.
All right. Do you have any recommendations regarding BIA templates? One would imagine that these should be pretty standard and applicable across the vast majority of an organization.
What we did, Bob, was we looked at a lot of the ones that were available in the marketplace and looked at some of the ones that, you know, DRI had developed. We looked at some of the ones that were on the DRJ website, and it did a bit compile for some best practices. And we basically took all those and assimilated those into what would work for us. Again, it's about adopting the information and the templates and as the tools and the instruments for your execution of your program to the culture of the organization. So we just didn't want to take some generic template off the shelf and use it. We wanted to take the best part of that and basically see how that would work and how that would communicate within our environment to our people. And that was important for our success, is making sure that it was applicable to them. It was easy for them to use based on the way that our organization operates and communicates.
All right. And has the framework you've developed been used in any real-world scenarios yet?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've had several issues associated. We've had earthquakes out in California. I had recently, we were impacted by the South Carolina flooding about a month or so ago. So we've had some outages within our technology that we've had to work with. So I mean, absolutely, it's been part of, you know, part of our program. I mean, it's on a day-to-day basis. I mean, if something were to occur, that's what we're going to rely upon. So absolutely, it is part of. It has been utilized and will continue to be, and as we continue to develop as well. So.
All right. Did you have to create any new tools, or what tools are you utilizing?
Well, we created a whole set of standard, you know, business continuity templates. So none of this, like I said before, is any type of rocket science. It's essentially, we have a business impact assessment tool. We have a risk assessment tool. We have a dependency analysis tool. We have a plan template tool. I mean, so these are pretty much all standard things that's throughout the industry. We just took the best of the marketplace and basically brought it together into a customized template that worked for Southern. So I mean, it wasn't like we went out and created anything specific, because, you know, it's all just basic business information, so it didn't need to be any more complex than that. We just wanted to take the best of what we did, as well as what was appropriate for our business, for the warehousing and the logistics and the transportation business that we operate. So we just customized it for that. So.
All right, and expanding on that topic, have you deployed any automated warning technology, and how does that fit into this framework?
We currently utilize the VOLO technology associated with the Thunder Call. So we do get some automated alerting processing associated with, you know, threats to our organization. We also utilize the VOLO notification system as well, and that's worked really, really well for us as far as being able to alert our, you know, keep alerting our staffs and things like that. And we're also currently working with them with a very, very incident command system associated with having a mobile command application where I can actually have my plans and actually do communications, incident command, incident coordination tasks and things like that all through my mobile device. So we're very much involved with designing and working with the VOLO team on that right now, making really, really great progress. We're actually going to start utilizing it within the next couple of months. So we're really, really anxious about that, because that is the future of this business. If you ask me, is the mobility portion of it.
All right, wonderful. Well, in essence of time here, we're going to wrap up here today. If we did not get to your questions, a ton of questions here still that were submitted we were not able to get to. We will follow up with everyone via email after the webinar has ended. So any parting words here, Dr. Chandler or John?
Well, this is Bob here. I would just say, just reiterate what I said a minute ago with the closing thoughts. I think that these are great, helpful guidelines and road signs and road postings. I would just focus on continuous improvement, and don't stop. This is something that only gets better with the more energy and effort you put into it.
Oh, agreed. Absolutely. This is business continuity is a continuous treadmill, and you basically need to be able to make sure that you can provide your organization with, so they understand where they are in that process. And I think this framework is not only easily executable, but it also kind of helps you gauge where you are and your level of maturity very, very simply, very, very easily. So I appreciate the opportunity to present it. And like I say, anybody has any further comments or questions, feel free to reach out to me either through the DRJ or directly to myself through my own email.
And Bob, this is Felipe over at VOLO. I just wanted to thank everyone for attending one more time, and also thank John and Bob and yourself for putting this on, hosting and presenting the material, and just say that we're out there to help. I mean, we, as a company, our most important job is to try and educate our clients and be there for them, and that's what this was about today, is to try and provide some more of that continuing education. So visit our website, come back for additional information, reach out to us if you have any questions. We'll be happy to help.
All right, wonderful. That was some excellent information shared here today. Thanks again, everyone, for their attendance today. We again hope you gathered some great information from today's webinar. DRJ would also like to thank John Louisi and Dr. Chandler for their time here today, as well as VOLO for sponsoring today's event. We will be emailing everyone a link to the recording of today's webinar as well. You may view it as frequently as you wish or share it with your peers. If you do have any additional questions, please contact Disaster Recovery Journal. Thank you again, and this now ends today's webinar.